It was raining, the kind of rain that soaks through your clothes and settles into your bones. Cold. Relentless. Uncaring. I stood there alone, my black coat heavy with water, my shoes sinking slightly into the wet ground. The priest's voice faded into the background, mixing with the sound of rain hitting umbrellas and marble. People stood in small clusters, whispering, checking their phones, glancing at their watches. And then there was me. No umbrella. No hand on my shoulder. No familiar voice saying, "Are you okay?" My wife's casket rested just a few feet away, slowly disappearing under a bed of flowers. 41 years of marriage reduced to polished wood and a final prayer. I watched as my children stood together under a large umbrella. Dry. Sheltered. Comfortable. They didn't look at me. Not once. That's when it hit me, not the grief, not yet, but the loneliness. The kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who no longer see you. My name is Walter Hughes. I'm 67 years old. And until that morning, I believed I had raised a family that loved me. Before I go any further, let me say this. If you're listening to this story and you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, subscribe to this channel. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, your city, your country. And if you've ever experienced something similar, you're not alone. I promise you that. Eleanor, my wife, was the quiet one in our marriage. I talked too much. She listened too deeply. People used to say she was soft-spoken, gentle, almost fragile. But what they never understood was that Eleanor saw everything. She noticed who entered a room first, and who was ignored. She remembered dates, tones, pauses between words. She once told me, years ago, "Walter, silence tells the truth louder than shouting." At the time, I laughed. Now, standing in the rain beside her grave, I understood exactly what she meant. Our children hadn't always been like this. When they were young, the house was loud, doors slamming, laughter echoing, Eleanor calling everyone to dinner while I pretended to read the newspaper. I worked hard. 2 jobs at one point. Everything I did was for them. College funds. First cars. Weddings I paid for with money I didn't really have. Somewhere along the way, I became useful. And then, slowly, I became unnecessary. Eleanor noticed it before I did. She noticed when calls became shorter. When visits required an occasion. When conversations turned into transactions. How's Dad's health? Did he update the will? Is the house fully paid off? She never confronted them. Never raised her voice. She just watched. Listened. Filed things away quietly. A year before she passed, Eleanor got sick. Cancer has a way of stripping life down to essentials. The house grew quieter. The kids came around more, but not to sit with her. They came with papers. With questions. With concern that felt rehearsed. One evening, after everyone had left, Eleanor reached for my hand. "Walter," she said softly, "promise me something." "Anything," I replied. "When I'm gone, don't rush. Don't explain. Don't defend yourself." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She smiled weakly. "Just listen. And trust me." I didn't understand then. The funeral ended quickly. People left as the rain slowed to a drizzle. My children were already walking toward the parking lot when I finally turned away from the grave. My oldest son said, "Dad, we'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. As if my wife hadn't just been buried. I went home to a house that felt unfamiliar. Her slippers still sat by the door. Her favorite mug was in the sink. The silence was unbearable. I slept in the chair that night. Not because I wanted to, but because the bed felt too empty. The next morning, the knock came early. Sharp. Confident. Purposeful. When I opened the door, all 3 of my children stood there. No sympathy in their eyes. No hesitation. "We need to talk about the house," my daughter said. "No." "How are you?" "No." "Did you sleep?" No mention of their mother. Just the house. They walked in like they owned the place. Sat at the table Eleanor had polished every Sunday. Spread out folders and documents like they were closing a business deal. "We think it's best if we move forward quickly," my son said. "You're emotional right now. It's not a good time for decisions." I looked at them, suddenly aware of how calm I felt. Not numb. Observant. That's when I remembered Eleanor's words. Don't rush. Don't explain. Don't defend yourself. So I said nothing. And that silence would soon cost them more than they could ever imagine. They spoke for nearly an hour. Words like assets, responsibility, future planning floated across the table like they were discussing a stranger's life. My life. My home. Eleanor's home. I watched their hands instead of their faces. My daughter kept tapping her nails against the wood. Impatient. My younger son avoided eye contact, flipping through papers he already knew by heart. My oldest sat back, arms crossed, calm and confident, the way he looked when he thought he was in control. "We're not trying to hurt you, Dad," he said finally. "We're just being realistic." Realistic. I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed, but because Eleanor had taught me something about people. When someone thinks they're winning, they reveal everything. "You can stay here," my daughter added quickly. "For now." "Of course. We'd never throw you out." "Not yet," she didn't say. "But legally," my son continued, "it makes sense if the house transfers sooner rather than later. Estate taxes. Future disputes. We don't want complications." Complications. I looked around the kitchen, the same kitchen where Eleanor used to hum while cooking. Where she had taped handwritten recipes to the fridge. Where she had once said, "This house remembers everything." "I need time," I said quietly. They exchanged glances. "How much time?" my oldest asked. I shrugged. A little. They didn't like that answer. "We can't delay too long," he said. "Mom wouldn't want things left uncertain." That's when something inside me hardened, not with anger, but clarity. "You're right," I said. She wouldn't. They left soon after, frustrated but confident. Certain they'd laid the groundwork. Certain that grief would soften me. As the door closed behind them, I stood there for a long time, listening to the echo fade. Then I went to the bedroom. Eleanor's side of the closet was still full. Dresses neatly arranged. Shoes lined up with care. Everything exactly where she had left it. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet tears that fell onto my hands as I whispered her name. "I don't know how to do this without you," I said. The house answered with silence. Later that afternoon, I noticed something odd. A drawer in Eleanor's writing desk, one I rarely opened, was unlocked. Inside was a single envelope. My name was written on it in her handwriting. Not shaky. Not rushed. Steady. I didn't open it. Not yet. Eleanor had been meticulous. If she wanted me to read it immediately, she would have told me. Instead, I placed it back in the drawer and closed it gently. That night, I remembered something from months earlier. Eleanor had asked me to drive her to the bank. She said she needed to update something small. I waited in the car. She was gone longer than expected. When she returned, she looked lighter. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled. "Better than okay." I hadn't questioned it then. Now, lying awake in the dark, listening to the house creak and settle, I wondered what else she had done quietly while everyone else was too busy calculating my worth. The next few days followed a pattern. My children called often. Not to ask how I was coping. Not to ask if I needed help. But to check in. Each call carried the same undertone, pressure wrapped in politeness. "Have you thought more about the paperwork? We just want what's best for everyone. You know we're doing this out of love." Love had started to sound a lot like urgency. On the fourth day, my oldest son showed up alone. He didn't knock. He used his key. A key Eleanor had insisted he keep. For emergencies. Dad, he said, walking in, we should talk privately. I sat across from him in the living room, Eleanor's favorite lamp glowing softly between us. He leaned forward. I'll be honest, he said. The others are getting nervous. They're worried you might change things. Change what? I asked. The plan. I raised an eyebrow. What plan? He sighed. You know what I mean. The understanding. There it was. Not written. Not spoken aloud. But assumed. I haven't agreed to anything, I said calmly. He smiled thinly. Come on, Dad. Mom always said things should be simple. I almost laughed. Eleanor never said that. She said things should be fair. You're emotional, he continued. This is a hard time. Let us handle it. Handle what? He gestured around the room. All of this. I looked at the walls. The framed photos. The corner where Eleanor used to read every evening. All of this. I repeated. Yes, he said. It's too much for you now. That's when I stood up. Not abruptly. Not angrily. Just enough to remind him that I was still there. I appreciate your concern, I said. But I'm not ready. His jaw tightened. Dad, he warned softly. Waiting too long could complicate things. I met his eyes. So could rushing. He left without saying goodbye. That night, I opened Eleanor's drawer again. This time, I took out the envelope. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but anticipation. Before opening it, I noticed something else inside the drawer. A small notebook. Leather-bound. Worn. I flipped through it. Dates. Names. Short notes. March 12th, overheard call. Money discussed. June 4th, pressure disguised as concern. August 19th, Walter didn't notice. I did. My throat tightened. She had been watching. Recording patterns. Behavior. Intent. Not out of bitterness. Out of preparation. The letter came last. I unfolded it slowly. Walter, it began. If you're reading this, I'm no longer there to hold your hand. I'm sorry for that. But I need you to be strong in a way you've never had to be before. I stopped. Took a breath. She continued. They will come quickly. They will speak kindly but act urgently. Do not mistake speed for care. I felt a chill. I have already taken steps. Do not explain them. Do not defend them. Simply listen. Tears blurred the words. You gave your life to provide. It's time you protect your peace. At the bottom, she had written one final line. Trust what I left you. It will speak when you don't have to. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Outside, the rain began again, soft this time, steady, familiar. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something unexpected. Not grief. Resolve. Because somewhere between Eleanor's silence and my children's impatience, the truth had settled in. They believed this was already over. They were wrong. The following week passed quietly. Too quietly. My children stopped calling. No checking in. No reminders. No polite pressure. At first, the silence felt like relief. But Eleanor had taught me something else too. When people who want something go quiet, it's rarely because they've given up. It's because they're planning. I spent my mornings walking through the house slowly, noticing things I'd ignored for years. The faint scratch on the hallway wall where my son had once crashed his bicycle. The loose floorboard near the stairs Eleanor always warned me about. The smell of her lavender soap still clinging to the bathroom towels. This house wasn't just property. It was memory. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not handwritten. Typed. Official. From a law firm. My children's law firm. They were no longer asking. They were proceeding. The letter spoke of next steps, clarifying ownership, and avoiding unnecessary delays. It suggested a meeting, soon. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it beside Eleanor's notebook. She had predicted this. That evening, I drove to the bank. The same branch Eleanor had visited months before. The teller recognized my name immediately. "Mr. Hughes," she said gently, lowering her voice. "We were instructed to expect you." That sentence alone told me everything. She led me into a private room where a manager waited with a folder already prepared. "We're very sorry for your loss," he said. "Your wife was very thorough." I nodded. He slid the folder across the table. Inside were documents I had never seen before. A trust. Eleanor's signature. Dates going back nearly a year. "This trust," he explained, "holds the house and several accounts. It becomes fully active upon your wife's passing." "And me?" I asked quietly. "You," he said, "are the sole beneficiary and decision-maker. With specific conditions." "Conditions?" I thought of Eleanor's calm voice. "Fair. Not simple." He continued, "The trust includes a clause that prevents any transfer, sale, or reassignment without your written approval, and an independent review." I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with awe. "She also included," he added carefully, "a behavioral provision." I looked up. "In the event of coercion, pressure, or legal action initiated against you within a defined mourning period, certain protections activate." "What kind of protections?" I asked. He hesitated. "Consequences." That night, I slept in the bed for the first time since the funeral. I didn't sleep well, but I slept with purpose. 2 days later, my children called. All at once. Messages. Voicemails. Urgency had returned. "Dad, did you get something from a lawyer? We need to clear up a misunderstanding. This is getting complicated." I didn't respond. Instead, I read Eleanor's notebook again. Each entry felt less like suspicion and more like evidence. She hadn't been guessing. She had been documenting. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. Neutral office. Long table. Too many smiles. My children sat together on one side. Their lawyer beside them. Papers neatly arranged. I arrived alone. No lawyer. No documents. Just Eleanor's calm presence in my mind. They mistook my empty hands for weakness. "My father is very emotional," my oldest explained to the lawyer. "We're concerned he may not fully understand." "I understand," I said calmly. The room went quiet. I continued, "I understand that you believe the house belongs to you. I understand you expected things to move quickly. And I understand you didn't expect resistance." Their lawyer glanced at me with mild surprise. "But what you don't understand," I said, "is Eleanor." My daughter scoffed softly. "Dad, this isn't about Mom." I looked at her. "It's only about her." Their lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Hughes, we're here to discuss property ownership and intent," I interrupted. "Let's not pretend this is administrative." Silence stretched. Then their lawyer slid a document toward me. "If you'll just sign here, we can simplify matters." Simplify. Eleanor would have smiled at that word. "I won't be signing anything today," I said. My youngest son leaned forward. "Dad, please. You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I replied gently. "I'm making it honest." The lawyer frowned. "Mr. Hughes, refusal may lead to legal action." I nodded. "I'm aware." That's when I placed a single document on the table. The trust summary. Their lawyer picked it up first. He read quietly. Then more carefully. Then he stopped. My children watched his face change, from confidence to confusion, to concern. "Where did you get this?" my oldest asked sharply. "My wife," I said. The lawyer cleared his throat. "It appears the property is held in a protected trust. There are restrictions here. What restrictions? My daughter demanded. He hesitated. Any attempt to pressure or force a transfer within the defined period triggers penalties. Penalties? My son repeated. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Loss of beneficiary consideration. Mandatory delays. Court oversight. Their smiles vanished. This isn't fair, my daughter snapped. I looked at her calmly. Neither was your timing. The lawyer stood. We should pause this meeting. They protested. Voices rose. Accusations flew. But I stayed silent. Because Eleanor had done exactly what she promised. She had left something that spoke when I didn't have to. As we left the room, my oldest son stopped me in the hallway. You planned this, he said quietly. I met his eyes. No, I replied. She did. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but steady. For the first time, I felt something shift. Not victory. Balance. Because this was no longer about a house. It was about who thought they could take from a man simply because he was grieving. And they were about to learn how expensive that assumption could be. The shift in their behavior was immediate. No more patience. No more polite concern. Now there were accusations. My phone rang constantly. Sometimes it was my daughter, her voice sharp and trembling. Sometimes my youngest son, trying to sound reasonable while slipping threats between words. And sometimes it was silence, long gaps followed by sudden calls, like pressure waves. You embarrassed us, my daughter said during one call. You're letting grief cloud your judgment. My oldest texted. This isn't what Mom would have wanted. They all insisted. They kept using Eleanor's name, as if repeating it would give them ownership over her choices. I stopped answering. Instead, I spent my days quietly putting things in order. Not paperwork, Eleanor had already done that. I sorted memories. Old photo albums. Letters tucked into books. Notes she had written to herself and forgotten to throw away. The more I found, the clearer it became. She hadn't acted out of fear. She had acted out of certainty. One afternoon, a courier delivered another envelope. This one was thicker. He asked me to sign for it. Inside was a formal notice. My children had filed a petition. Not to help me. Not to protect me. To question my competence. They were suggesting I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. I read the words slowly, carefully. In the best interest of Mr. Walter Hughes. That phrase hurt more than anything else. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply folded the notice and placed it next to Eleanor's notebook. She had a page for this too. If they do this, it means they are afraid. The hearing was scheduled quickly. Too quickly. A small courtroom. Quiet. Sterile. My children sat together again, their lawyer confident, rehearsed. They avoided my eyes. When the judge asked if I understood why we were there, I stood and answered calmly. Yes, Your Honor. My children believe I am confused. And are you? The judge asked gently. No, I replied. I am grieving. There is a difference. Their lawyer presented arguments, age, emotional distress, recent loss. He spoke as if I were already absent. Then my lawyer stood. Not one they had met before. Eleanor's lawyer. She had retained him months earlier. He spoke slowly, deliberately, laying out evidence, not opinions. Dates. Records. Notes. The trust. The behavioral clause. The documented pressure. He didn't accuse my children. He let their actions speak. When he submitted Eleanor's notebook, the room went still. The judge read silently for a long time. Finally, she looked up at my children. Grief does not equal incompetence, she said firmly. And urgency does not equal care. The petition was denied. But it didn't stop there. Because Eleanor had anticipated this too. The attempt itself triggered another clause. A review. of intentions, of behavior, of eligibility. When we left the courtroom, my daughter was crying, not softly, angrily, like someone who had lost control. "This is your fault," she spat. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my child. I saw a stranger desperate to win something she believed was already hers. At home that night, I sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor's final envelope. The one marked later. I had avoided it until now. Inside was a second letter. Shorter. Sharper. "Walter," it read. "If you are reading this, they have crossed a line." My hands trembled. I loved our children. But love does not mean blindness. What they are doing now is not grief, it is entitlement. She paused, even on the page. I have added one last safeguard. It will activate only if they choose force over patience. I swallowed. They will say I was cruel. Let them. I was careful. At the bottom, one sentence was underlined. Do not stop this process. Let it finish. The next morning, my children arrived unannounced. No lawyers this time. No folders. Just anger. We need to talk, my oldest said. His voice was tight, controlled. I think you said enough, I replied. This has gone too far. My daughter snapped. You're destroying this family. I shook my head slowly. No. I'm watching it. My youngest finally spoke, his voice breaking. Dad, please. We didn't mean for it to be like this. I studied his face. Then why was it? I asked. No one answered. Because the truth had already settled between us. And it was heavier than any document. That afternoon, the final notice arrived. The safeguard Eleanor had warned me about. Due to their actions, documented pressure, legal force, and an attempt to override my autonomy, the trust had executed its final condition. Their beneficiary status was suspended. Not permanently. Conditionally. They would receive nothing unless, and until, they demonstrated genuine reconciliation, without expectation of reward. No timelines. No guarantees. No leverage. Only choice. When they read it, something broke. Not financially. Emotionally. Because for the first time, they realized something they had never considered. This was never about money. It was about character. And Eleanor had built her final legacy to test exactly that. I stood alone again that evening, this time on the porch, watching the sky clear. The rain was gone. The house was quiet. But for the first time since her funeral, the silence felt right. Not empty. Intentional. And somewhere in that quiet, I felt Eleanor's presence, not as loss but as strength. Because what she left me hadn't destroyed them. It had revealed them. Weeks passed. Not calls. Not visits. Not apologies. Just distance. The house settled into a new rhythm. Quiet mornings, slow evenings, sunlight moving gently across floors Eleanor once polished with care. I cooked simple meals. Walked the neighborhood. Sat on the porch longer than necessary. People assume silence is loneliness. Sometimes it's recovery. One afternoon, I received a handwritten note. Not from my children. From Eleanor's lawyer. He requested a brief meeting. Not urgent. Not formal. Just necessary. When I arrived, he offered coffee and a small, knowing smile. She thought of everything, he said. I nodded. I'm starting to understand that. He slid one final document across the desk. A letter. Not legal. Not conditional. Personal. She asked me to hold this until everything else was finished, he explained. She didn't want it read too early. Or too late. I waited until I was home to open it. I sat in Eleanor's chair, the one near the window, and unfolded the paper slowly. Walter, it began. If you're reading this, the noise has finally stopped. I closed my eyes. I hope you didn't fight. I hope you didn't beg. I hope you remembered who you were before everyone needed something from you. I smiled softly through tears. I didn't do this to punish them. I did it to protect you. And maybe, to give them one last chance to choose love without conditions. She paused there, even in ink. If they come back quietly, without demands, without timelines, welcome them. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. My breath caught. And if they don't, that is not your failure. At the bottom, she had written the last words she ever left me. Live gently now. You've carried enough. I folded the letter and held it against my chest. That evening, the knock came again. Not sharp this time. Not confident. Careful. When I opened the door, it was my youngest son. Alone. No folders. No anger. Just tired eyes and hands shoved deep into his pockets. I didn't know how to come, he said quietly. So you came honestly, I replied. He nodded. I'm not here to talk about the house, he said quickly. Or the trust. Or anything like that. I waited. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. Not because of what we lost, but because of what we forgot. He swallowed hard. You. I stepped aside and let him in. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We sat. And talked, about nothing important. About the weather. About work. About Eleanor's cooking. When he left, he didn't ask for anything. That mattered. The others came later. Slowly. Separately. Some with regret. Some with silence. I welcomed none of them with promises. Only with honesty. The trust remained unchanged. The conditions remained firm. Because forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. But it can exist beside them. Now, when I stand in the house Eleanor and I built, I no longer feel like someone waiting to be taken from. I feel rooted. I still miss her every day. But I also feel her everywhere, in the quiet wisdom of restraint, in the strength of patience, in the courage to let people reveal who they are. At her funeral, I stood alone in the rain. The next morning, my children came from my home. What she left me didn't destroy them. It showed them the cost of forgetting love when it matters most. And what it gave me was my life back.